Your hands are cold. The rust is orange-brown, flaking under your thumb, and this blade hasn't moved in maybe 40 years. The hardware store wants you to throw this away and buy a $40 replacement made of stamped metal and mystery plastic. For $3, I'm going to show you how to bring this back to a professional edge that will outlast you. The industry calls it obsolete. I call it the best $3 you'll ever spend. If you've ever looked at something rusted and thought it was already dead, hit subscribe. You're exactly who this channel was built for. I wasn't looking for a rust remedy the first time I drove out to a hollow tucked back off a two-lane state road, gravel crunching under the tires the last half mile, looking for a man who still ran a working sawmill his grandfather had built with his own hands. He was well into his 80s, and his hands looked like the tools he used, cracked, sun-dark, curled permanently around a handle that wasn't even there anymore. He moved slow, but nothing about him looked worn out the way you'd expect. What stopped me was his toolbox. Every blade in it was decades old, not rusted and replaced, not kept behind glass as some kind of collector's piece for show. Working, sharp. He pulled out a chisel that had to be older than my father and split a piece of kindling with it, clean as a razor, without so much as a pause to check the edge first. I remember thinking that chisel had probably outlived 2 or 3 modern replacements already, and it wasn't done yet. I asked him how he kept steel that old still cutting after all those years sitting out in a damp shed with no climate control, no dehumidifier, nothing but a tin roof between it and the weather. He didn't reach for a spray can. He didn't reach for anything with a brand name on it. He reached for a mason jar filled with a cloudy liquid and a wad of steel wool that looked like it cost less than a candy bar at the counter. I didn't understand what I was looking at until I got home and started digging through old farming records and county agricultural notes from an era before anyone thought to sell you a tool restoration kit in a shrink-wrap box. And when I found what I found, you'll understand why what I'm about to show you actually matters, not just for your tools, but for how you think about everything you own. Walk into any hardware store today and the solution to a rusted tool is always the same. Throw it out, buy new. A replacement hand tool runs anywhere from $25 to $60 depending on what you're after, sometimes more if it's a specialty piece. A professional chemical rust removal kit runs you another $15 to $30 on top of that, and most of those kits lean on harsh acid compounds that strip rust and eat into the good steel underneath at the exact same time, which means the tool actually degrades faster the next time rust sets in, not slower. This isn't a small business. According to industry market research, the US hand tools market was valued at $6.1 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach $7.8 billion by 2032. That's billions of dollars a year built almost entirely on the assumption that when a tool looks bad, it's done. That rust means retirement, not restoration. Every one of those dollars depends on people never learning what a $3 jar of vinegar can do. Multiply that by every homeowner who tosses a ruined tool instead of restoring it, every yard sale box of junk, every dumpster behind a construction site with perfectly salvageable steel sitting in it, and you start to see an entire industry built around convincing you that surface rust means the end of a tool's usable life. It isn't, it never was, but there's real money in you believing it is, and there always has been. The old-timers never bought into that kind of thinking. They didn't have the option to just replace something because it looked bad. They never threw away good steel over a little surface rust, because surface rust was never treated as anything more than exactly what it is, a surface problem, not a death sentence for the tool underneath it. They understood something the modern market has spent decades quietly training us to forget, that rust is a condition, not a verdict. And that's the whole reason a Depression-era farmer's toolbox, passed down 2 or 3 generations, handled by hands that never once considered buying new, can still outcut a brand new set fresh off a store shelf 100 years later. The tools didn't get better, we just stopped being taught how to take care of the ones we already had. Here's the method, and it really is this simple. Fine grade steel wool, the softest grade made, the kind meant for finishing wood, not stripping metal, soaked in plain white vinegar. That's the entire $3 tool. No proprietary formula, no patented anything. Just 2 ingredients you could find in almost any kitchen and hardware aisle in the country. The vinegar is a mild acid weak enough that it won't touch good solid steel, but strong enough to dissolve rust on contact. The fine steel wool is soft enough that it polishes as it scrubs instead of gouging into the metal the way a coarser grade would. Together, the vinegar loosens what the steel wool then physically lifts away, one thin layer at a time. It eats the rust for breakfast without scratching the good steel underneath it. No pitting, no dulling, no hidden damage waiting to show up later. This isn't guesswork or an internet myth that happens to look convincing. A detailed rust removal guide confirms that submerging cleaned metal in undiluted white vinegar for roughly 12 to 24 hours dissolves rust effectively, with heavily corroded items sometimes needing up to 48 hours. That's the exact soak window the old-timers were using generations before anyone thought to write it up in a modern guide. They just called it letting it sit overnight, not acetic acid treatment. Old agricultural extension bulletins and farm maintenance notes from before the Second World War described near-identical treatments for keeping tools serviceable. Plain household acids used to maintain hand tools for decades at a stretch, long before anyone thought to market a chemical alternative in a spray bottle with a warning label. When I asked the old sawmill owner why it worked, he put it about as plainly as anyone could. Rust, he said, is just iron that forgot what it wanted to be, and vinegar reminds it. That's not folk poetry, that's chemistry a fourth grader could follow along with, and it's proof that you don't need a laboratory or a chemistry degree to understand your own tools. There's no reapplying every season, no special skill required, and none of the slow wearing down that comes from scrubbing a tool with harsh acid every time it needs cleaning. Here's why nobody ever told you this. 3 groups profit every single time you don't know it. The manufacturers who'd rather sell you a brand new tool than have you restore the one you've already got sitting in your shed. The rust remover companies who sell you a $20 chemical bath for a problem plain vinegar solves for pennies on the dollar. And the big retailers who'd rather move a $45 item off the shelf every few years than have you fix something you already own for the price of a candy bar. It's not a conspiracy, it's worse than that. A conspiracy is something you can fight once you know it's there, you can point to it, name it, push back against it. A system you can't even see is harder to fight because it doesn't feel like a system at all. It just feels like the way things are. Like a rusted tool is simply done. Like replacement is simply normal, simply expected, simply what everyone does. Here's exactly what you need, and none of it costs more than a fast food combo meal. 1 bag of fine steel wool under $3 at any hardware store. Look in the sanding and finishing aisle, not the cleaning aisle. 1 cup of plain white distilled vinegar, the kind already sitting in your kitchen cabinet right now. A shallow container big enough to fully submerge the rusted head or blade. Even an old margarine tub will do. A rag for wiping down. A small can of light machine oil, the same kind you'd use on a squeaky door hinge. Submerge the rusted part in straight vinegar for about an hour if the rust is light. If it's heavy or the tool's been frozen shut for years, give it up to 12 hours overnight works fine. Pull it out and scrub with the steel wool working in the direction of the grain. You'll feel the rust give way almost right away, and you'll hear it too. A satisfying scritch as decades of oxidation lift off in orange flakes right in front of you. Rinse it clean under running water. Dry it immediately because wet bare steel starts rusting again within the hour if you leave it sitting out. Then wipe on a thin coat of the machine oil to seal the surface and keep new moisture out. You can start this before lunch and be finished by dinner easily. Here's roughly what you'll notice week by week. Within a day, the tool moves freely again. Hinges swing, blades slide, moving parts stop fighting you every time you pick them up. By the second week, as long as you're keeping up a light oil wipe now and then, no new surface rust shows up, even if the tool's sitting in a damp shed. By the 4th week, the edge is holding through normal, regular use the exact same way it did the day it was first forged. No flash rust creeping back in overnight, no pitting eating into the metal, just steel doing what steel was always built to do. There's an objection worth answering here because I hear it constantly, and it's a fair one. Won't the acid weaken the steel over time? No. Vinegar is far too mild to affect hardened steel. It only dissolves the oxidized iron, which is the rust itself, and nothing more. Soak times measured in hours, not days. Keep the treatment entirely safe for the good metal sitting underneath all that rust. What if the rust on your tool is worse than what's shown here? Really bad, frozen solid, decades-old rust. Heavier rust simply means a longer soak, sometimes 12 or even 24 hours for something that's been locked up for years, followed by a second pass with the steel wool once it's dried. The method itself doesn't change at all, only your patience does. And what if the people around you insist it's not worth the trouble, that you should just go buy something new instead? Show them the receipt. $3 in materials against $40 or $60 for a replacement that likely isn't even made from steel as good as what you're already holding in your hand. If you're still not convinced, try it on the worst, most hopeless looking tool sitting in your shed right now, the one you'd already written off as garbage months ago. You've got nothing left to lose on that one. You didn't lose this knowledge. It was taken from you quietly, one disposable product at a time, one just buy new advertisement at a time, one generation at a time, until nobody thought to question it anymore, until it just became the water everyone was swimming in. There's a whole group of people out there, plenty of them our own age, who've decided they're done being sold solutions to problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. People who'd rather spend an hour with a $3 jar of vinegar than $40 replacing something their own grandparents would have laughed at the idea of ever throwing away. So tell me down in the comments, what's the oldest tool sitting in your shed or garage right now that you'd already written off as garbage? I want to hear what you're bringing back to life this week. And next time I'm heading back out to that same stretch of country because that same old sawmill owner also showed me how his grandmother kept a root cellar sitting at a steady, unwavering temperature with no electricity involved at all. And I've been digging through old records ever since, trying to piece together exactly how she managed it with nothing but dirt, stone, and knowing exactly where to dig. I'll see you there.